Number to call to be part of our show, 888-623-3646, 888 Dog 6. We'll get back to your calls here coming up. NFL free agency less than 24 hours away from officially getting underway. And this next story that I want to talk about, I'm already angry, all right? I'm already mad. So I'm a Jets fan, right? I do local radio in the New York area. Used to do local radio on the Jets flagship station, but I live and die with the Jets. They're my team, for better or worse. And the Jets had one of the most miserable seasons you could have this past year. All the hype, the hoopla, the expectations, and 4 plays in, it was essentially over. We tried to pull ourselves into, hey, maybe they could rally around Zach Wilson, but he's not any good. And ultimately, the Jets wasted a top 5 defense, top 5 special teams, Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall, and they finished 7-10. It was incredibly deflating, incredibly frustrating. But you look at this offseason, you say, you know what? Aaron Rodgers back. You make some improvements to this offensive line that was terrible last year and all injured. You add a receiver, and you're not that far away with this defense. You know, you have the Chiefs in the AFC, and then after that, it's a year-to-year league. They need to be bold. They need to be aggressive this offseason, right? Their GM, Joe Douglas, their head coach, Robert Saleh, they're lucky to have a job right now. So there's a headline on SNY.TV's website. SNY is the Jets' local affiliated TV station. Connor Hughes is the reporter who put together the story. Respected NFL reporter who covers the Jets. The headline: don't expect Jets GM Joe Douglas to deviate from his plan and spend big in free agency. It's a do or die season for Douglas, but he won't break the bank. And to that I say, what are we doing? If you're the Jets, if you're Joe Douglas, have I missed this grand plan from this general manager? Record going into year 6, 5th full offseason is 27-56. Let me say something. A Joe Douglas run team could win 29 games in a row, and his record still wouldn't be above 500. So what am I reading here that the telling Connor Hughes, well, we're not going to deviate from our plan. Believes in staying the course. Meaning what? Doing nothing? Or making other bad free agent signings like Allen Lazard? Or CJ Uzama? Or Dwayne Brown? Like, come on. Staying in the course. No, the Jets have spent money. They spent it poorly. I mean, this is a laughable story here, and I'm not ripping on the guy who wrote the story. I mean, if true that the Jets are going to be like financially responsible in free agency, that's stupid. Adjust your approach. Your quarterback's 40, coming off a serious injury, spend money and fix the offensive line. You don't want to spend crazy on a free agent wide receiver? You don't want to pay Calvin Ridley $20 million a year? Fine. Go trade a 4th round pick and get Cortland Sutton, whose cap hit is $12 million. Like, this idea that the Jets have this like grand plan. We Jet fans, we don't know what we're talking about. Come on. Anyone actually believe this nationally? Like in this story I'm reading here, it says that, well, Joe Douglas learned from former Ravens executive Ozzie Newsome. Okay, well, he also learned from Howie Roseman, who always makes big trades and free agent signings. I mean, in this story from SNY, it mentions that Jets GM Joe Douglas wants to develop players and keep them. So explain why Bryce Huff, their stud pass rusher who had over 10 sacks this year, might be walking out the door and the Jets aren't going to pay him. They developed him. He was an undrafted free agent, and they're going to let him walk out the door? What are we talking about here? I mean, this story, if true, that, the Jets are going to spend some money, but they're not going to shop at the top. Are you kidding me? Go get the best offensive tackle. Go get the best guard. Trade for a receiver, and put Aaron Rodgers in the best spot where he can have success. Because without him, you have no chance anyway. You're not that far away. You're a 7-win team. Supplement your roster with good free agent signings. You don't need to spend $1 bazillion. But like, this story is, to me, just hogwash, man. I read this story and it's like, well, it's good to hear Joe Douglas won't sabotage next year's Jets GM because it won't be him. Because if he stinks it up this offseason, he's not going to be here. I think the Jets will spend some money in free agency. And I get it. You don't want to build your entire team through free agency, but you're on a different timeline now, Joe. You're in year 6. Your 5th full offseason. Adjust your approach. Doing the same thing over and over again is the very definition of insanity. I mean, he's been here for 83 games. They're 30 games under 500. They got a 41-year-old quarterback, 40-year-old turning 41 quarterback coming up major surgery. There is no plan. If you had a plan, it failed. You took Zach Wilson second overall. It didn't work. Adjust your plan and get some good offensive linemen, get another receiver, and win some games because the excuses got to stop. Oh, we got this great plan, building in all our guys we believe in. It's a bunch of nonsense. Any Jet fan hearing this, I mean, your blood is boiling. What exactly is his plan that has gotten the Jets 27 and 56 over the last 4 years? How about a plan to win games? You know what will help win games? Not letting Bryce Huff, your undrafted free agent pass rusher who you developed, Joe, who has turned out to be a damn good player, who's a 10 sack a year guy, don't let him walk for nothing. You know, spending money to go and get interior offensive linemen and one of the best tackles you could get, that's worth it. All right. Aaron Rodgers, he might say he wants to play 2, 3, or 4 more years. You got to look at it like you got this year. Because you don't get 2025 unless you win in 2024. And this story makes it sound like Joe Douglas is like this great GM. He's got this master. He's had one incredible draft in 2022. Oh, it's not about winning the offseason. It's about drafting players and developing them. It's Bryce Huff about to walk for nothing. Like on the eve of free agency, the Jet fan who's like dying for this team to go out there and try and surround Aaron Rodgers with as much talent as humanly possible has to read this. This is nonsense. Jets won't spend big in free agency. I get it. You know, maybe you don't pay Calvin Ridley $20 million. All right, I'll listen to that. Can you go get a number 2 receiver then? You know, like Mike McCagnon, the old Jets GM, traded a 5th rounder for Brandon Marshall. Pretty good move. And Mike McCagnon wasn't very good. When's Joe Douglas going to make a move like that? Mike Tannenbaum, who's now on TV all the time. He traded for Santonio Holmes and Braylon Edwards, and they won. They also spent money in free agency. You build your team multiple ways. The idea, you got to build through the draft. That's nonsense. It's a combo of the two. Kansas City Chiefs, after they lost in the Super Bowl, rebuilt their entire offensive line the same way the Jets now need to do it. Remember that Super Bowl against the Buccaneers? Bucs fans remember it well. The Jets need to do. They need 3 starters on their O-line. I don't want to hear about Joe Douglas's master plan when he went 7-9 in 2019 with a team that wasn't his, 2-14 in 2020, 4-13 in 2021, 7-10 this past year, 7-10 this past year. Yes, he deserves a pass for Rodgers getting hurt on the 4th play of the year. No one expected that. But that's also why he's probably employed right now. Because the backup quarterback was Zach Wilson. His draft pick, he refused to admit, stunk. You know, there's a term for Zach Wilson sycophants in New York. You're Zach Wilson truthers. You blindly defend the guy and somehow think he's great when there's no evidence to support that theory. Like, Joe Douglas is the biggest Zach Wilson truther. He's allowed him to wreck the last 2 seasons. Joe Douglas needs to adjust his strategy. Once again, if you're just tuning in, SNY reporting that, you know, the Jets will dabble in free agency, but they won't spend big this year. That's nonsense. I mean, the Jets, the last time, I don't think people realize this nationally. You know, the last time the Jets made the playoffs, you know what year it was? 2010. Longest playoff drought in professional sports. Professional sports. This GM, who's in year 6 of a 6-year contract, got hired in June of 2019. Now going into his 5th full offseason with free agency and a draft, 6th season overall. He's talking about this grand plan. I mean, once again, a Joe Douglas team could win 29 games in a row and he would be under 500 as a GM. And I like Joe Douglas for some of the moves he's made. No one can deny it. Sauce Gardner, Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall, Jermaine Johnson. Finding Quincy Williams off waivers. Finding John Franklin Myers off waivers. Signing DJ Reed. Like, the Jets have some pretty good players. It's why we as fans want to see this team supported in free agency. You don't need to spend like a drunken sailor, but you got to be aggressive. All right? You got to put Aaron Rodgers in the best possible situation because I don't care if he wants to play a couple more years. You might not get a couple more years. You have this year to prove it, and if not, you're screwed. Then all the reports of changes in New York, they're going to happen. Because the only reason why Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas have a job right now is because Aaron Rodgers vouched for them. And he got hurt in the fourth play of the year. And Jets ownership didn't want to blow the whole thing up or fire one and not the other. But God, Joe Douglas, he learned from Ozzie Newsome and didn't believe in spending big in free agency. All right. Joe Douglas also learned from Howie Roseman, who does both drafting and developing and spends in free agency. That's what's called good GMing. Something Joe Douglas needs to learn how to do on a more consistent basis. I mean, shame on anybody to expect some urgency here after 83 games of 30 and 30 games under 500 football, man. 30 games of under 500 football, a 40-year-old quarterback coming off major injury, and fans should not expect much. That's crazy, man. I saw this story today. I'm like, man, this bothers me. If true, they sit on their hands and do nothing. They'll do something, but if there can't be, what's the line in Breaking Bad? No more half measures. With the Jets, you should be all in this year. All right, because if you're Joe Douglas, you got one shot at being a GM. If this team stinks or doesn't make the playoffs and you're out of a job, you're not getting another chance. So you need to win in 2024 to get 2025. So I'm not saying you trade away all your future picks, you spend all your money, but adjust how you approach free agency in the draft. Have a sense of urgency. Because quite frankly, if there's a fan base in sports that's been tortured in recent years, it's the Jets. All right. And it's time for the Jets to have a winning season because they have wasted an elite defense the last 2 years, and I'm sick of it. All right. Trade Zach Wilson, sign a legit backup, get 3 starting offensive linemen, 2 in free agency, 1 in the draft, get a number 2 receiver, either in a trade or a lower tier free agent signing, and let's go. All right, I'm tired of hearing about Joe Douglas's master plan. He's in year 6. All right, the record's the record. 57-56. Your calls to wrap up our show here on a Sunday evening. 888-623-3646. 888-MAD-DOG-6. Les, Art, David, I see you guys on hold. We're coming to you to wrap up our show. Keep it right here. It's Jake Asman with you. It's Mad Dog Sports Radio on Sirius XM, Channel 82.